The first notice said his house was listed for rent, and it included photos of his living room. Arthur Collins saw it on his phone while sitting in that same living room in Naples, Florida. The listing showed his address, described the property as vacant, and offered immediate move-in for a discounted monthly rate. The photos were recent. They showed furniture he recognized, angles he knew, and details that confirmed someone had access to images taken from inside his home. Arthur had never listed his house for rent. He checked the listing again and found a contact number and an email connected to a property management company he had never heard of, Seabrook Residential Services. The listing claimed they were handling the rental on behalf of the owner. Arthur was the owner. He called the number. A man answered and confirmed the property was available, explaining that the owner had relocated and authorized remote leasing. The man offered to send documents and requested a deposit to secure the unit. Arthur ended the call without responding. He went online and checked the county property records. His name still appeared as the owner. There was no recorded transfer, no lien, and no visible change to the title. That meant the scam had not yet reached the stage of altering ownership. It had started with representation. Someone was acting as if they controlled the property without changing the record. Arthur contacted a real estate attorney and explained the situation. The attorney recognized the pattern immediately. The scam involved listing properties the scammers did not own, collecting deposits from renters, and disappearing before tenants realized the property was occupied or unavailable. The risk extended beyond financial loss for renters. If multiple tenants were given access or attempted to occupy the property, it could create legal complications for Arthur. The attorney advised immediate action. Arthur filed complaints with the listing platforms and requested removal of the listing. The platforms responded, but the listing reappeared under different accounts within days. The structure allowed repetition. Arthur decided to monitor the activity. Within a week, he noticed changes. The listing description was updated to include a claim that the property was in pre-foreclosure, suggesting urgency for renters to act quickly. That detail was not true, but it created pressure for potential victims. The scam was evolving. Arthur began receiving unexpected visits. People came to the property asking about availability, referencing the listing. Some had already communicated with the scammers. One couple had transferred a deposit and believed they had secured the rental. Arthur explained the situation to each visitor. The scam was already affecting others. The attorney expanded the response. Notices were posted at the property stating it was not for rent. Formal complaints were filed with local authorities. The goal was to limit further impact while identifying the source. The investigation revealed that the listing photos had been taken from previous online records, combined with images captured during a recent open house event in the neighborhood. Someone had gained access temporarily and documented the interior. The information used in the listing matched public records. The scammers did not need ownership. They needed believable details. The next phase introduced a larger risk. Arthur received a document by mail claiming to be a notice of intent to lease the property through a third-party management agreement. The document listed Seabrook Residential Services as authorized representatives and included a signature that resembled his own. He had never signed it. The attorney reviewed the document and identified it as an attempt to formalize the scam. By creating a management agreement, the scammers could present documentation to renters that appeared legitimate. The structure was expanding from simple listings to supported claims. Arthur's attorney advised filing an affidavit of fraud to establish a record that any documents tied to that company were unauthorized. This created a reference point for future disputes. At the same time, the scammers shifted again. The listing was removed. A new listing appeared, this time advertising the property for sale. Arthur found it while searching his address online.
The listing described the house as an off-market opportunity available below value for a quick cash transaction. It included the same photos and used a different company name, Meridian Gulf Holdings. The scam had escalated. Selling the property required stronger documentation. Arthur checked the county records again. No transfer had been recorded yet. That meant the scammers were attempting to secure a buyer before altering ownership. The strategy relied on speed. Find a buyer, create urgency, complete the transaction before verification. Arthur's attorney contacted the listing platforms again and reported the fraudulent sale listing. At the same time, a notice was filed with the county to flag the property for potential fraud activity. The goal was to limit further impact while identifying the source. The potential buyer moved forward despite these actions. The buyer was an investor from another state who relied on the listing and the documentation provided by the scammers. The scammers sent a draft purchase agreement and claimed the closing would be handled remotely through a private title service. The buyer requested verification. The scammers provided a copy of a deed showing the property transferred from Arthur to Meridian Gulf Holdings. That deed did not exist in county records. It was created but not recorded. The buyer compared it against public records and noticed the discrepancy. That hesitation prevented the transaction from completing. The scam did not succeed at that stage. Arthur's attorney used that attempt as additional evidence to demonstrate intent. The pattern now included rental fraud, management agreement forgery, and attempted sale. The structure showed progression. Start with low-risk transactions, move to higher value targets, exploit gaps in verification. Authorities connected Arthur's case to others across Florida. Similar listings appeared in different counties using different company names but identical methods. Retired homeowners were frequently targeted because their properties were fully paid off and less actively monitored. The absence of lender oversight created opportunity. Arthur continued to monitor his property records. Several weeks later, a new entry appeared. A deed had been submitted for recording. The document listed Arthur as the seller and Meridian Gulf Holdings as the buyer. It included a notarized signature and identification details. The submission date matched the timeline of the attempted sale. The fraud reached the final stage. Arthur's attorney acted immediately. An emergency filing was submitted to block the recording and challenge the deed. The county placed a temporary hold pending review. The notary listed on the document was confirmed. Identification had been presented, but verification procedures had not been followed properly. That weakened the document. The mailing address tied to Arthur's property had also been altered shortly before the submission. This step was consistent with earlier attempts to redirect communication. The sequence aligned with known fraud patterns. The court reviewed the evidence and determined that the deed was based on unauthorized representation and invalid identification. The document was rejected and not recorded. Ownership remained unchanged. The attempt to transfer the property failed. Arthur's case demonstrated how multiple layers of fraud could target a single property. The process did not rely on a single action. It evolved through stages, each building on the previous one: listing, representation, documentation, transfer attempt. Each stage tested the system. Arthur implemented additional protections. He enrolled in property monitoring services, secured his personal information, and required direct verification for any transaction involving his property. He also placed visible notices indicating that the property was not for sale or rent. The system that allowed the scam relied on documents appearing valid at the time they were presented. The listing was enough to attract victims. The documents were enough to support claims. The attempted deed was enough to reach the recording stage. All of it had been built on information taken from public records and used without authorization. Arthur remained in his house. The ownership never changed, but the process showed how close it came. and how a series of steps, each accepted as valid for a moment, could have been enough to take his property away without him ever agreeing to it.